In the quiet little town of Adabo, lived a young woman named Naila. She was the eldest daughter in her family, but unlike her loud and playful siblings, Naila was always quiet, always calm. She didn't speak much, but her actions always spoke louder than any words. Whenever something needed to be done, she was the first to step up. When her uncle, Papa Jonasi, became very sick and needed to move in with the family, everyone looked away. No one wanted to give up their room or comfort. But Naila didn't complain. She simply picked up her things, smiled, and moved into the dusty old storehouse outside the house. It was small, filled with cobwebs and boxes, and had no proper bed. But she cleaned it up and made it her own without saying a word. While others went on with their normal lives, Naila quietly cared for her uncle. She cooked for him, cleaned up after him, and even bathed him when he became too weak to do it himself. She never asked for thanks, never looked for praise. She just did what she felt was right. Even though her siblings often mocked her, saying she was just trying to impress their uncle, Naila stayed kind and steady. No one noticed her sacrifices. She became like a shadow in her own home, forgotten, ignored, but she kept going, her heart full of quiet love. What no one knew was that these small acts of kindness would one day change everything. Every day in the house, Naila worked quietly while her siblings laughed, played music, and scrolled on their phones. Tabogo, Lelo, and Kumo didn't lift a finger to help. They saw Naila as nothing more than a maid, always busy with chores. "She's just trying to impress the old man," they would say, rolling their eyes. "Look at her, the family angel," Lelo would add with a mocking tone. Tabogo once called her a maid with a martyr complex, and they all laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. But Naila didn't respond. She just kept going, washing dishes, sweeping floors, and making warm soup for Papa Jonasi. As the days went on, Papa Jonasi grew weaker. His legs hurt. He couldn't walk much. He coughed all the time, and sometimes he couldn't even eat without help. Nobody wanted to deal with him anymore. They said the smell of his medicine made them sick. They said they were too busy. But Naila was always there. She helped him to the bathroom, made sure his blanket was tucked in, and sat beside him when he couldn't sleep. She even rubbed his legs every night when the pain was too much. Sometimes, she would sing quietly to calm him down during the long, dark nights. She didn't do it for attention. She didn't expect anything. She did it because she cared. Even when her siblings laughed at her, Naila stayed gentle. She never shouted, never complained. She lived in the dusty storehouse outside, ate last during meals, and wore old clothes without a single word of protest. People in the town barely knew she existed. To them, she was just the quiet one. But behind those quiet eyes was a heart bigger than anyone could see. While others chased comfort and ease, Naila gave everything she had to a sick old man. Not for praise, not for a prize, but simply because it was the right thing to do. One quiet evening, the lights went out in Adabo again. The house fell into darkness, and everyone groaned. But Naila didn't mind. She lit a small candle and placed it near her uncle's bed. The soft glow filled the room with warmth. Papa Jonasi was lying down, breathing heavily. His legs were hurting again, and the pain made it hard for him to sleep. Without being asked, Naila sat beside him and gently started massaging his tired legs. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, with love. She didn't speak. She never did during these moments. It was her way of showing care. No noise, no fuss, just quiet comfort. As the candle flickered, Papa Jonasi looked at her. His eyes were full of sadness, but also something else, peace. After a few minutes he whispered, "You are the only one who sees me as more than a burden." His voice was weak, but his words were clear. Naila looked at him, surprised, but said nothing. He continued, "When I'm gone you'll understand why it mattered." Then he closed his eyes. Naila didn't know what to say. She just smiled a little, and kept rubbing his legs gently. She didn't think much of his words. To her this wasn't a big deal. She wasn't doing it for thanks or for anything in return. She didn't expect money, praise, or gifts. In her heart, it was simple. Her uncle was sick, and he needed someone. That was enough for her. She believed love meant doing the right thing, even when no one noticed, even when it was hard. That night, in the soft candlelight, something deep passed between them. A silent promise, though Naila didn't realize it yet. She thought she was just helping an old man sleep. But something much bigger was already unfolding, quietly in the dark. The day Papa Jonasi passed away, the house fell silent for the first time in a long while. But it didn't last. Within hours, the noise returned, not of mourning, but of planning. The family rushed through every part of the funeral. No one cried. No one slowed down. It felt more like they were checking off a task than saying goodbye to a loved one. Lelo complained about the heat. Tabogo kept looking at his phone, and Kumo didn't even show up for the family prayer. No one asked how Naila felt. No one even noticed the tired look in her eyes, or the way her hands trembled as she folded Papa Jonasi's clothes one last time. At the funeral, things were no better. People whispered, some even smiled like they were at a casual event. And then, right before the burial, Lelo rolled her eyes and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, now that the house is free again, Naila can finally stop playing Mother Teresa." Some laughed. Others looked away. But Naila didn't say a word. She stood still, her face calm, holding back the wave of emotions inside her. She wore Papa Jonasi's old brown shawl, the one he used to wear on chilly mornings. It still smelled faintly of the herbal oil she used to rub on his legs. When it was time to walk behind the casket, no one joined her. Everyone stood back, waiting for it to end. But Naila walked alone, one step at a time, behind the man who had once whispered that she was the only one who saw him. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just walked slow and steady, holding onto the shawl like it was the only thing keeping her together. No one truly saw her in that moment, but it didn't matter, because she had seen him. And that was enough. A week after the funeral, the family gathered again, but this time not for mourning. A lawyer named Madame Sopako arrived in a quiet car, holding a dusty brown briefcase. She stepped into the house with calm steps and tired eyes. The briefcase looked old, like it hadn't been opened in years, and inside it was an even dustier envelope, Papa Jonasi's will. Suddenly, everyone in the house was alert. Tabogo sat up straight. Lelo fixed her hair. Kumo finally showed up. The lounge was full of fake smiles and greedy eyes. Everyone knew Papa Jonasi owned land just outside town, and had a bank account no one really talked about. Something hidden, maybe even big. They were sure the will would be fair, and that each of them would get a piece of the pie. Chairs were pulled around the big table. Tabogo sat at the head like he was already the man of the house. Lelo and Kumo sat close to him. Their mother looked serious, ready to hear good news. But Naila didn't sit at the table. She quietly stood in the corner, holding her hands in front of her, wearing the same old dress she had worn at the funeral. She didn't expect anything. She had already returned to her chores that morning, sweeping the kitchen and making tea for the guests. Madame Sopako cleared her throat and began to speak. Her voice was firm but gentle. The room grew still. No one touched their tea. Every eye was on the lawyer. Every ear waiting for their name to be called. Everyone believed the estate would be shared, fairly or not. They all expected a piece. But as the envelope opened and the will came out, they didn't know the truth they were about to hear. Naila, still standing by the wall, stayed quiet, unaware that this moment would change everything she had ever known, and finally bring light to the kindness that had gone unseen for so long. The room went silent as Madame Sopako opened the will and began to read. Everyone leaned forward, eyes wide, waiting for their names to come up. Tabogo was already picturing the land. Lelo imagined shopping trips with the money. Kumo stared at the lawyer like he was trying to guess the future. But Naila just stood quietly in the corner, holding the teacup she had brought in earlier, not expecting anything, not even looking at the lawyer. Then Madame Sopako paused, looked down at the paper, and read slowly. To the one who slept on the floor for me when no one else would. The air in the room changed. It felt like time had stopped. No one moved. Madame Sopako continued, reading clearly. I leave all I have, my land, my money, my stocks, and the house, to Naila. Silence fell again, heavier this time. You could hear the sound of someone's spoon dropping into a cup. No one said a word for a moment. Then chaos. Tabogo stood up so fast his chair fell over. What? This must be wrong. Lelo gasped loudly and pointed at Naila. She tricked him. She's a witch. Kumo walked out of the room, shaking his head in disbelief. Their mother looked shocked and turned to the lawyer. Are you sure this is correct? But Madame Sopako remained calm. Everything here is legal. Signed, witnessed, and stamped by the local chief's court. There are no mistakes. Naila stayed still. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She gently placed the cup down and looked at no one. Then she said in a quiet voice, I asked for nothing, and I received everything. Her words cut through the room like a sharp breeze. The others were still shouting, but she didn't care. For once, the girl who slept on the floor was seen. Not because she asked to be, but because someone had remembered her love when no one else did. The moment Naila's name was read aloud as the sole heir, the lounge turned into a storm. Tabogo slammed his hand on the table so hard that the cups shook. This is a joke, he shouted, his face red with anger. Lelo stood up, her voice shaking with rage, pointing at Naila like she was a criminal. She used witchcraft. There's no way Papa Jonasi would leave it all to her. Kumo didn't say a word. He just stood up and walked out, his face pale and full of shock. Their mother, holding her chest like she couldn't breathe, turned to Madame Sopako with teary eyes. Please check again, there must be some mistake, she whispered. But the lawyer calmly opened the folder and showed the documents again. This will is real. Signed, stamped, and witnessed by the local chief's office. Everything is in perfect order. In the middle of all the shouting, crying, and accusations, Naila stood still like a rock in the rain. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't even look surprised. She looked around slowly at the people who had laughed at her, ignored her, and called her names. Then, she gently placed her hand on the back of the chair she never sat in, looked straight ahead and said softly, I asked for nothing, and I received everything. Just then, someone knocked a teacup off the table. It crashed to the floor and shattered into tiny pieces. Like the silence that followed her words. The room froze. For once, no one knew what to say. The girl they thought was weak, the one they pushed aside, now stood with everything they had secretly wanted. But Naila didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply turned and walked away, her head held high, leaving behind the broken pieces, both of porcelain and pride. After the storm settled, Naila didn't scream, didn't seek revenge, and didn't throw anyone out. Instead, she calmly told the family they had 30 days to move out. Not out of hate, but because she knew it was time to rebuild. Not just the house, but the piece that had long been missing. There was no shouting, no threats. Just one quiet message. 30 days. Please use them well. Her siblings were shocked. They expected her to act the way they would have, with anger or pride. But Naila stayed the same. Gentle, firm, clear. As the days passed, Naila began the process of turning the old, tired house into something beautiful. The broken doors were fixed. The walls, once faded and dirty, were repainted in soft, calming colors. The kitchen that once echoed with arguments now filled with the warm smell of soup and fresh bread. Every room was cleaned, aired out, and filled with light. But she didn't stop there. The little storehouse outside, the one where she had once slept alone on a cold mattress, was cleaned, painted, and transformed into something new. Soft curtains, warm blankets, a small bookshelf, plants by the window. It became a place of quiet, a place for anyone who needed to rest, especially the caretakers who, like her, gave and gave without expecting anything in return. She named it Jonasi's Rest, in memory of the man who saw her heart when no one else did. Neighbors started noticing the change. They spoke about Naila with new respect. Children played in the yard again. Old people came by just to sit and talk with her. The house that was once filled with noise, judgment, and selfishness had become a home of healing. Naila didn't rebuild with money, she rebuilt with heart. And every nail, every brushstroke, every flower planted was a quiet promise. This will be a place of love always. Months passed. The house was now full of life and purpose. Naila's Women's Health Center was growing, helping families from all around Adabo and nearby villages. People came with hope, and they left with dignity. One quiet morning, as the sun poured gently through the windows, a familiar figure walked slowly up the path to the house. It was Lelo, but she wasn't the loud, proud woman everyone remembered. Her clothes were worn and faded, her makeup was gone, and the confident walk had turned into small, hesitant steps. In her hands, she held a folded job application, creased at the corners, like it had been held and reheld many times. Naila was sitting on the front steps, reviewing some papers. When she looked up and saw her sister, she didn't flinch. She just waited. Lelo stopped a few feet away, eyes lowered. The tone in her voice was no longer sassy, no longer mocking. It was soft, almost shaky. "I heard you're hiring assistants for the health center. I'd like to help." There was a long pause. Naila looked at her carefully, not with hate, not with pride, just with quiet strength. Then she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile Lelo expected. It was kind but clear. "We help the sick here, not the selfish," she said gently. "Good luck." Lelo's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She nodded, turned around and walked away slowly. Naila didn't call her back. Not out of cruelty, but because she knew. Kindness isn't something you borrow when times are tough. It's something you live by, even when no one's watching. And that's what made all the difference. Naila didn't use her inheritance to live a fancy life or show off. Instead, she opened a women's health initiative in her uncle's memory. The center helped women and families who had no one, just like Uncle Jonasi once had no one but her. She hired nurses, counselors, and young women who wanted to learn and give back. People from small villages like Itend and Sesha began to visit. They brought their sick mothers, their tired grandmothers, and even babies needing care. Naila welcomed them all with warm food, a soft bed, and most importantly, respect. She didn't forget where she came from or how it felt to be unseen. She remembered the long nights, sleeping on the floor, massaging her uncle's legs in the dark, hoping he wasn't in too much pain. She remembered how her family laughed behind her back, and how Papa Jonasi's last words promised a meaning that would one day unfold. Now that meaning was clear. Every patient helped, every caretaker trained, every village reached. It all came from that love. One day, a journalist visited and asked her, "Why give so much to a man who had nothing?" Naila smiled, her voice calm and sure. "Because love is never a loss," she said. "Sometimes it just waits, in a will, to change your life." And so, the quiet girl who once slept in a dusty storehouse became a light for many. Not because she wanted anything, but because kindness, when given without conditions, becomes a legacy that never dies.